Remakes in general are essentially pointless. If a movie is well made and important enough to warrant a remake, then it's probably a timeless gem that can't be improved on. But not every remake is pointless. Whether a director finds a new point of view on a familiar story or they use modern technology to do things that weren't possible when the original was made, then a remake can become a beast of its own and earn its own place in the canon. Horror remakes are especially difficult because fear is one of the most difficult emotions to replicate. Nothing is ever as scary the second time. If they remade Misery today, the hobbling scene couldn't catch audiences off guard like it did in 1990 because now they know to expect it. To figure out what makes a great horror remake and what makes a crappy one, I'll be comparing two horror remakes about to celebrate their 10th anniversary. The Evil Dead remake by Fede Álvarez and the Carrie remake by Kimberly Peirce. One of those remakes worked beautifully while the other one was fucking dreadful. Evil Dead was the good one. The intention with the Evil Dead remake was to bring the original Cabin in the Woods story into a modern horror landscape, with newer effects and a brand new cast of characters to be tormented by the Necronomicon. The intention with the Carrie remake was to readapt Stephen King's debut novel for a modern audience. One of these remakes set itself up for success and the other set itself up for failure. Audiences were clamoring for more Evil Dead, and the franchise is more beloved for its tongue-in-cheek tone than its characters, except for Ash, of course. So making a grisly new Evil Dead movie with new characters was a no-brainer. But there was no need to readapt Carrie. The 2013 remake wasn't the first attempt to readapt Carrie after Brian De Palma's original 1976 version, and they've all failed pretty miserably because none of them are ever going to beat the De Palma version. De Palma nailed it right out of the gate. Sam Raimi's original Evil Dead was a landmark in the history of horror cinema. It inspired a generation of young horror fans to pick up a camera and shoot their own horror movies with their friends. Looking back on it now, it's clearly a low-rent production, but the amateurish acting and the homemade effects are part of its charm. Álvarez's remake didn't just update the effects, it put a fresh spin on the story with Mia's drug withdrawals. The premise of a group of friends foolishly traveling to a creepy cabin in the middle of nowhere for a weekend getaway makes a lot more sense in the remake because Mia's going cold turkey, so it actually seems like a good idea to get away from everything and go to the middle of nowhere. And anytime Mia witnesses some demon shit, her friends can just shrug it off as a hallucination, which stretches the rubber band of suspense further and further. The Carrie remake tries to put a fresh spin on the material, but all the changes are superficial. It sets out to modernize the story, but it just tags some modern commodities onto the familiar events of the narrative. Chris films Carrie's first period on her smartphone and uploads it to YouTube. Carrie Googles telekinesis when she starts to discover her powers. There's just the odd bit of modern tech peppered throughout the film. The 1976 original is timeless. The technology might be different now, but the awkwardness of adolescence and the ruthlessness of high school bullying haven't changed. Both of these remakes have a new opening scene needlessly filling in backstory and a flashback prologue. Evil Dead 2013 opens with the killing of a possessed teenager in the basement of the cabin. The movie could have done without this scene, but at least it gets the proceedings off to a spooky start and throws in a bit of foreshadowing to brace audiences who didn't see the original for the fact that this is a fucked up cabin full of demons. Carrie 2013 really didn't need its opening scene. The original opened with the iconic inciting incident that hooks audiences into this story, Carrie getting her first period in the shower after PE. The remake opens with Margaret White performing her own home birth. She considers killing the baby but decides not to. It's much more powerful to hear Piper Laurie make these disturbing confessions in the climactic monologue than to actually see a gratuitously bloody attempted baby homicide in the opening frames. The MO of the Evil Dead franchise has always been to push the envelope further and further. Evil Dead 2 is an even more bizarre revamp of the original with a goofy sense of humor. Army of Darkness sent Ash back to the Middle Ages, but Raimi was limited by the technology of his time. When he remade the Evil Dead for a major studio in 2013, Álvarez had the money and resources at his disposal to realize whatever twisted shit came into his mind. The remake recreates the biggest scares from the original, like the tree rape, in a much more visceral and believable way, and also has plenty of its own big scare moments up its sleeve. I particularly love the excruciating sequence where one of the characters is possessed via her arm, uses an electric turkey carver to gruesomely cut off her own arm to prevent the spread of the possession, and then the possession ends up spreading anyway. But it's not always the case that CGI makes the story any better. Whereas the Evil Dead remake uses modern effects to enhance the terror, the Carrie remake is an example of how CGI can be used to lessen the effect of a set piece. The CG blood in the remake doesn't have the same impact as the bucket of fake blood that De Palma poured on Sissy's space set. The knives that fly into Margaret in the finale had much more impact when real knives were on wires as opposed to the flurry of digital blades that come at Julianne Moore. Álvarez has the same eye for gonzo gore that made Raimi's original Evil Dead trilogy so much fun, and his direction of the remake was guided by Raimi himself in the role of producer. So the Evil Dead remake strikes all the right chords and replicates the original's Carrie's anything-goes, balls-to-the-wall terror. Peirce doesn't have a background in horror, so her version of Carrie never matches the intensity of De Palma's big scares. Peirce's strength as a filmmaker is in melodramatic character studies, which would have served her well for the character-driven nature of Stephen King's storytelling, but her ability to direct actors is impeded by miscasting in Carrie. Carrie 2013 was woefully miscast. One of the wisest moves with the Evil Dead remake was not trying to recast Ash. No one but Bruce Campbell could play Ash. So the remake takes place in the same universe as the original, with a whole new cast of characters staying at the cursed cabin. Carrie couldn't do that because the characters are so integral to its success. The original was perfectly cast down to the supporting players. Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie each received much-deserved Oscar nods for playing Carrie and her mother in the De Palma original, and every actor around them was perfect for their role too. The same can't be said of the cast in the remake. Julianne Moore was a great choice for Margaret, but her performance is pretty much just a carbon copy of Piper Laurie's. Amy Irving was terrific as remorseful mean girl Sue Snell in the original, but the remake's Gabriella Wilde doesn't bring the same depth to the character. Portia Doubleday is fine as Chris Hargensen in the remake, but Nancy Ellen really leaned into the character's unapologetic bitchiness in the original. John Travolta gave a hilarious performance as Chris's boyfriend Billy Nolan in one of his earliest roles, like the baffled look on his face when Chris says "I hate Carrie White" mid-blowjob.
Billy, I hate Carrie White.
Who? But Alex Russell's performance as Billy in the remake is completely unmemorable. And what were they thinking when they cast Ansel Elgort as Tommy Ross? You have to believe that Carrie is ludicrously lucky to have been asked to the prom by this sweet, popular, gorgeous jock with a heart of gold and the soul of a poet, so you're as skeptical as she is when he asks her to the prom. You could actually believe that when Tommy was played by William Katt, the greatest American hero, runner-up for the role of Luke Skywalker. He has that hunky all-American look. But when he's played by Ansel Elgort, I'm less skeptical about Tommy asking Carrie to the prom than I am about her saying yes. Both Sissy Spacek and Chloe Grace Moretz are too pretty to play Carrie as she's described in the book. Stephen King describes Carrie as a frog among swans, overweight and unattractive with blotchy skin. Sissy Spacek and Chloe Moretz are both beautiful movie stars who are in great shape and have flawless skin, so neither of them really look like Carrie. But Spacek, unlike Moretz, still manages to embody the character because she plays the shyness and the awkwardness and the loneliness so effectively. Moretz does a great job of playing Carrie as a cold-hearted killer in the final reel. She did play Hit Girl after all, but she falls short where Spacek succeeded the most. Spacek might be prettier than Carrie is described in the book, but she's just as invisible and downtrodden as the character on the page. Moretz doesn't give Carrie as much depth and vulnerability as Spacek did. There are a few lessons that horror remakes can take from the success of the Evil Dead remake and the failure of the Carrie remake on their 10th anniversary. Don't just tell the same story over again, put a fresh spin on the material. If you're gonna recast iconic roles, you better find the right actors. If you're casting a handsome man, don't cast Ansel Elgort. If you're gonna try to recreate the works of masters like Sam Raimi and Brian De Palma, you better get a born and bred horror director for the job. And if you can't recapture the magic that made the original so great in the first place, then you might as well not bother. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.